Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. A bunch of email over the weekend caught my attention. Everyone who knows me knows that I work in the LTL freight industry. I've driven a truck for years. I've worked in the less than truckload industry for over 30 years now. And the big question, the big accusation, the big finger pointing. No, I'm a big union guy. Yellow Freight has closed its doors. And understand, major talking points are, well, it's all the union's fault. And the anti-union crowd, they're going to be all tingly in the panties, all warm and fuzzy, because it's what they do. This is a great talking point for them when a union company goes out of business. But understand, as someone who watched the demise of the unionized LTL trucking industry, it's the company's fault. It has a lot to do with Reaganomics. It has a lot to do with deregulation. It has a lot to do with, the fact that when they deregulated, they screwed the existing companies by making their rights worthless. There's a lot of that. But companies like Yellow, who did a lot of really stupid stuff, under the guise that, well, we're going to break the union. We're going to break their back. Finally, we've got this chance. And look, congratulations to the Yellow leadership. Congratulations to their CEO and their executive board. Congratulations to their board of directors, all those folks, because you've done what past executives and past leadership have been unable to do and dreamt of. They only dreamed of being able to break the union. Now, you broke the unionized workforce, and congratulations, you deserve that. But you did it by making every stupid decision imaginable to get around treating your workers decently. I mean, that's the part that is just, I'm stuck with today. And look, it's no surprise. It really is. It's no surprise. This is what corporate America does. Because they know they can use the suffering that these some 30,000 workers who are now out of a job, you can use their suffering. You go, see, look what happens when you have the audacity to say, I want more for my family and more for my work. This is what happens when you have the audacity to say, I should have some job security. I should have some say in my workplace. This is what happens. See, look what happened. Look what happens when you join a union. This is it. And understand, Yellow succeeded years ago in clawing back, at least a decade of wage and benefit money. They've done that. Probably more like 15 years they were able to claw back. And oddly enough, they still were competitive with the non-union companies with respect to cost per man hour, because they were able to do what no other company was able to do. Create enough crisis to where the workers who want to keep their job do what they always do, gave massive concessions. And you go, well, how do you know this? Well, I worked for Roadway Express for almost 20 years. And when Yellow bought Roadway, the number two company buying the number one company, and it turned, the two big behemoths, the number one and number two, into a number three. You figure out how you do that, because I'm struggling. But this is what Yellow's management, and this is what management in general has the ability to do. Bad decisions. Wasn't the workforce, wasn't the contract, wasn't any of that. It was bad management decisions. And I'm going to get into that in a minute. But I lived through what Yellow was able to accomplish with Roadway. Roadway was a very stable company. They owned everything that they had. They owned their terminals. They owned their trucks. They owned everything. It was garbage, and they ran it into the ground, but it was paid for. So you knew your check wasn't going to come bouncing back to you. Now, oddly enough, when Yellow decided, hey, we're going to buy Roadway, we're going to use Roadway's stuff as collateral, because Yellow's model was always lease everything. They didn't actually own anything. So when they had the opportunity to buy the number one company and then use its assets to pay its debts, which were many and plentiful, because Yellow had debt. They took on $1.1 billion in debt when they bought Roadway, and then they took on another 1.7 when they bought U.S. Holland and those and Redaway and all those other. They just kept buying up these companies because they were going to create a super company. Which you go, okay, they're all unionized companies. You're going to create a unionized super carrier. That sounds, I guess, if you can get away with it, if the Federal Trade Commission is dumb enough to let you do it, okay. But in the interim, they kept buying up and creating non-union subsidiaries and feeding them all kinds of stuff, all the work, all fuel and all kinds of stuff, in the hope that you were going to be able to kill the golden goose that made it 99 years. And good on Yellow. They made it 99 years and only filed bankruptcy now twice. But if you go back and you look at what has happened over the years, these companies being able to monopolize and get bigger and bigger and bigger and take on more and more debt and do all of this stuff, not in their best interest, not in the best interest of the country, not in the best interest of their workers, just not. What happens? The workers are going to be the ones that suffer. The government isn't on the hook for a $700 billion loan that, or $700 million loan that Trump gave to Yellow. I guess they've got 30% of a stock that was worthless. And here's the question I have, and I need a stock person. I need a Wall Street person to explain this to me because I understand capitalism a little bit. I think I do a little bit. I think I understand the stock market a little bit. Companies do well. They operate well. They make a good product. They make good profits, and those profits drive the stock price upward, so that people want to invest in that company. And again, this is 100 level econ Wall Street stuff. When the companies do well and they're operated properly and they make a good profit, the shareholders want to invest in that company, and so they can get a return. That's how this is supposed to work, right? That's what we're told. So I'm trying to figure out how how is it possible that on July 27th, just a couple of days ago, Yellow stock was 49 cents. Everybody, including me, we're going, I don't think they're going to make it this time. Now, understand, Yellow has been the cat of the trucking industry. So many lives, I mean, more than 9 lives, to be honest. I left at the end of 2010 because I didn't think they were going to make it through 2011. I'm like, well, this is done. I should probably find somewhere else before it goes. Now, again, I'm surprised it's made it another 12 years. But on July 27th, the stock price was 49 cents. And I actually had thought about, maybe I should buy some of that. Now I'm really kicking myself in the behind because it peaked today, the day that it announced it was closing its door and laying off 30,000 employees, no longer producing a product, no longer doing anything. It is shut down. I drove by the terminal that I used to work at. There's a truck across the entrance. You can't get in. It is shut off, sealed off. There's nothing going on. There's no work. There's no product. There's nothing. So can someone explain to me how on July 27th, just a couple of days ago, it was 49 cents. And it peaked today at $1.98. Can you explain how that happens? It closed today at $1.76. Now, when it was 49 cents, I was actually looking at it going, they're the cat with 9 lives. They seem to always get bailed out, whether it's by the union who gives them massive wage concessions, or it's the union investing in them and saying, hey, we're going to help you because we want to keep our 23,000 members employed. We want to do that. So they were given so many opportunities to right the ship, and they just kept screwing it up. But I'm completely mind blown at how, again, it was just 49 cents a share just a couple of days ago, and the day it says we're closing the doors, it peaks at $1.98. How does that happen? Please, if there's a Wall Street person listening, I gotta know. Because, and understand, I do know that whenever corporate America says, hey, we're going to lay off a bunch of workers, we're going to make those workers, lives, worse, we're going to cut their wages, we're going to cut their benefits. I understand Wall Street gets all, ooh, Jojo the idiot boy and tingly in the panties and all happy. I get that. because that means reduced cost, means potentially more profit. So something, I get that, because you're still in business. You're still doing something. You're still producing a product. And whatever you can steal from the workers to give to the shareholders get happy, and they want to buy into it. I understand that. I don't understand how you can cease operations entirely and you have that kind of, massive stock increase. Other than the game is all rigged. And this whole capitalist thing that we're told is the great golden goose, like Yellow once was, produced thousands of good paying jobs, was the number 2, then the number 1 carrier in the country, and somehow figured how to screw that all up through insane change of operations. Always someone tinkering, moving, shuffling people around, shuffling operations around, just making bad decisions overall, paying CEOs an absorbent amount of money. It was how you killed the golden goose. And how they do that? They took on massive debt. And the Bush recession didn't help them. And from that point forward, they've been trying to dig themselves out. So for me, I come back to those principles of business that actual business people have told me. That you invest in your business, you pay your debts down, you don't owe anyone, and you stick to your work. Yellow's problem was they're always trying to look for an out. They're always trying to look for a way to screw over the union and screw over the workers. And look, Roadway was not a lot different. When Roadway was in operations, they were starting other companies to compete with them. This is the part that blows my mind. You're the number 1 carrier in the country, and you're going to create your competition. Because what Roadway did back in the 90s was they created these companies, Viking, Coles, and Spartan, RPS, you may remember, Roadway Package Service, which eventually turned into FedEx. All of this stuff they tried to start off of the Roadway dime. And those unionized workers who did the work every day and produced an incredibly effective and good service product were funding all of this other stuff. Because these CEOs so wanted to break the union. So I saw all the comments today of people, going, well, I'm so glad I don't have a union. And you go, why? You're probably earning 40% less than you should. Your health care probably sucks. You probably don't have a retirement plan. And somehow you're happy that you don't have any of the things that these guys fought for and unfortunately lost because these executives have made horrible decisions. And this is where my frustration is. The message coming out of this closure, out of this failure, is going to be pointed at the unions and the union workers and not at the boardroom where it belongs. These families are going to struggle. These families are going to suffer, all because of a handful of executives who wanted more for themselves and they wanted to take it from their workers. That to me is the argument here. It's angering, it's frustrating, and it's predictable. We know where this is going to lead us. So when someone says, hey, those greedy union workers put that company out of the business, now you know better. Because it's always mismanagement. It's always these people who tell us they know so much while lining their pockets with even more. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the Heritage Foundation, one of those right-wing think tanks, they published some of the same kind of garbage they normally do. But this one is the 2023 Index of Economic Freedom. And you know where this is going to go. You know, Joe Biden's destroying economic freedom. Joe Biden has led the country into the worst economic freedom country in the world. And according to them, we now have the worst rating since the first one in 1995. It's the worst it's ever been. According to the Heritage Foundation, the worst economic freedom time in the history of the country from 1995 till today. And according to them, there are 16 European countries who are now freer. They are now freer than you. And it's one of those things that makes me go, explain that, please. Give me some thoughts here on what you mean. Oh, you mean, capital to do whatever it wants and no regulations and no government intervention. And because understand what economic freedom in their world means. It means capital gets to do whatever the blanket wants to do. And you lowly working people, well, not so much. You're just a tool to be used and discarded. And this is one of these moments because I think the conservative movement is a little afraid. I think they're scared because what's happening is the younger generation of conservatives aren't buying the smaller, less intrusive government in business operations. They're not buying the tax breaks, and they're not buying the deregulation like past generations did. It was a blind faith. You ask any conservative 10 years ago, what do you stand for? And it was low taxes, deregulation, and small government. That was their mantra, and they had it down. They focus group tested it, think tank approved it, and they slew it out to the masses. And the masses ate it up. It's simple. It's easy to remember. They put it all over bumper stickers. So you're driving down the road. Any idiot can go, oh, yeah, small government, low taxes. Yeah, deregulation. Oh, that's great stuff. Oh, yeah. Well, these younger people are now seeing what a crummy tax code like ours has done, what deregulation has done, what business-friendly, laissez-faire policies have done to their parents and their families, and they're kind of going, no, I'm not so interested. Not so interested. And what's interesting to me is the article I was reading said, Donald Trump has done this to us. Because conservatives are trying to figure out how to get rid of Trump because in their words, Bernie Sanders and former President Donald Trump are not that far apart when it comes to free trade. And they're not. And I've been saying that, since 2015. So it's good for the right-wing publication over there at the Washington Examiner to finally go, hey, yeah, they're not that far apart. Now, what I find interesting, again, is they're really concerned about the free market. They're concerned that all of the work that they've done, all of the damage they've done over the last, 1971 till today, the last 50 years, all the damage they've done is going by the wayside. It's going to be undone by a younger generation who sees just how bad it's been to their parents, but still conservative on those other issues, the social stuff. Still don't like transgenders, still don't like LGBT stuff, the cultural identities, abortion, that's their thing. And this week, the National Conservative Student Conference is happening in D.C. This is where the folks at the Young America's Foundation has their big shindig, where they bring some kids in and they do some grooming, some good old-fashioned grooming. Because this is what they do to these young people. They groom them by pushing this garbage down their throats. And what this conference is going to be about is going back to that idea of free enterprise, free markets, small government, where today's conservatives want to use big government. They want to be Ron DeSantis. They want to be Florida. They want government in everyone's bedroom. They want government involved in policing corporate America and their choosing of advertising. Now, what's interesting is the Budweiser thing is capitalism working. It's the free market. And this, if I were conservatives, I would be saying, yeah, this is capitalism working. We don't need government. We, the people, did it. We don't need any government intervention. But no, young people are saying, no, we want government intervention. And that is scaring the ever-loving bejeebus out of old school conservatives, because they don't know how to deal with this. Because for them, it was just about greed. It was just about more for us. All those social issues were meant to divide, those working people, keep them pitted against each other, so that you could keep stealing from them. And one of the central tenets of my North Star is always, how do we ensure that working people get a fair shake and a decent wage for their labor? The hours of your life that you give to a corporation to make profit off of, you should get a portion of that. I'm not saying all of it, but you should get a portion of it. And we're not. And that's the thing that's really interesting to me, in that, the right is seeing it. The right is kind of, the conservative right is kind of afraid. All of that work, all of that treatise to save free enterprise could be going up in smoke because it's gone too far. We've given these big corporations so much. We've given the wealthy incredible amounts of wealth through a bogus tax code, that finally even they're seeing it. That finally even some conservatives are going too far. Because one of the complaints is that on the trade issue, the Trump voters, the Trump faithful, they're with Sanders on the trade issues, on the work issues. They're with Democrats on those issues. There is a path, and this is where Republicans have a problem. If Democrats get their heads out of their behinds and start talking to, instead of demonizing, people who may have voted for Trump in the past, but saying, hey, look, these are the issues that are important. The economic stuff. There's a chance to basically make the Republican Party obsolete, because they're a party without a message. Their central message was always, tax cuts for the rich, free trade for corporations, and small government, so that corporate America could run roughshod over them. What are you going to do when conservatives are saying, no, we want a government that's going to take on special interests and the very wealthy? What happens when conservatives start going, you know what, those student loans that I've been taking out as a kid, I'm paying for a generation. How about we tax rich people to help us pay for that education? What's the conservative movement going to do? Because we're in a moment. Understand, the economy is moving slowly in the right direction. The sad reality is the working class of this country is being left behind in a lot of places. And this is why, I like Joe Biden. I like him a lot. He's doing the right thing on a lot of levels. But strengthening the ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions, get people the ability to unionize, to speak up, to make sure that we protect work. Big stuff. Want to hear your thoughts, though? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. We'll take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1939. That was the day striking auto workers in Cleveland, Ohio, defended their picket lines in what is known as the Battle of East 140th Street. Members of UAW Local 45 at GM's Fisher Body Plant had been on strike for 3 weeks. They had joined striking GM workers at 12 plants throughout Michigan. They demanded a supplemental agreement granting skilled workers wage increases, overtime adjustments, and seniority security and apprentice provisions. In Cleveland, strikers vowed to stop the scabbing and were mostly successful. Now, at the start of the morning shift, a scab attempted to plow through the picket lines at a high rate of speed. Strikers flooded the gates and brought the scab car to a virtual stop. As they attempted to convince him not to cross through, mounted police viciously charged and attacked the strikers. Police continued to shoot tear gas guns from behind plant gates. Soon, there were more than 5,000 picketers fighting with police as workers poured out from half a dozen nearby plants to support the strikers. For over 2 hours, workers showered strike-breaking forces with bricks, rocks, and paving blocks. They overturned scab cars and drove the police off the street and into the plant. Fighting broke out again in the afternoon when police tried to bring in more tear gas supplies. Strike leaders directed activities from an amplifier on the roof of a nearby restaurant. The next day, famed Prohibition crusader Elliot Ness, now Cleveland's director of public safety, enforced a 500-yard riot zone, banning all gatherings near the gates and limited picketers to 7 at each gate. Strikers began picketing the homes of known scabs and would ratify a new contract just days later. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Senator Tom Cotton, a far-out right-winger, is to good public policy what a boll weevil is to a good cotton crop. Totally destructive. But he is politically candid. Rather than disguising his racial bigotry, for example, Tom flaunts it, as he did last month in an open letter to the retail giant Target. While the senator is usually a devoted corporate-hugging Republican, he lashed out at Target for business policies that he furiously condemns as racially discriminatory against white people. What popped Tom's cork was the chain's pledge to increase the number of black people it hires by 20%. Holy Dixieland, wailed Cotton. Hiring more of them means fewer jobs for us white people. He insisted that Caucasians had the right to take any and all of Target's jobs. Interestingly, Target's gesture to racial equality was made 3 years ago, with no peep of protest from the now infuriated Cotton. What changed? The GOP's dog-whistling tune, the new politically correct line of anti-black racists, even parroted by today's Republican Supreme Court, is that all efforts to provide racial fairness and balance are, get this, illegal racism against the white majority. So Cotton is just scurrying aboard his party's latest anti-black bandwagon, proclaiming that whites must be protected from racial progress. Not only are Tom and his ilk threatening teachers, librarians, and local governments for promoting equality, but also brand-name corporations that they claim to be woke. That is, not solely focused on profits, but also promoting a little attention to America's need for social justice. This is Jim Hightower saying, ironically, Tom's clique piously claims to be devout Christians. But guess who was supremely woke? Jesus. Tom Cotton needs to review the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus declared that those who hunger and thirst for justice are blessed.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So you may remember last week I was in Washington, D.C. for a big event, and we stopped by Black Lives Matter Plaza to march on the picket line with our friends in the Writers Guild and the Screen Actors. And, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, the reality, like we talked about last week, is, you know, you've got to get out and you've got to make your message. You've got to get out and talk to people. You've got to be out and be a presence. So my son and I had a great opportunity with our friend Sarah Nelson, the president of the the Association of Flight Attendants over at CWA, to get out and do a little of just that. And while we were marching on the line, I met up with Elliot Bales. He is an actor, member of SAG-AFTRA, Actors Equity. He's a member of SAG-AFTRA's Washington Mid-Atlantic Local Board, colonel in the U.S. Army, retired. This guy's everywhere and into everything, and some great roles that I saw. Elliot, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate the time.
So let me start where we are. Where are things right now with negotiations? Anything happening? Are we anywhere closer to this coming to an end? Anything?
Not at this point, and I'll speak from what I see in our communications with the national organization. We've been at this for 3 weeks. We left when they did not come to an agreement after giving them a 12-day extension, and they have not returned to the table or offered anything else.
So is the sense on your end, what I've had others tell me, that it's rumored that an executive said we're just going to starve them out until they lose their apartments and they go broke, and then they're going to come back begging? Is that kind of the sense, since there have been no negotiations?
Yeah, that was a statement made by some anonymous executive during the WGA strike before we even walked out. So that does seem to be a bit of the sentiment. I think there's a huge disconnect between people on yachts and at billionaires camps and those of us who are lunch pail, hard hat wearing actors who just work for a basic wage when we get to.
Now it's interesting that you frame that like that, because when you talk to people, they think actors are everyone's Tom Cruise or Matt Damon, people making 17-figure salaries, but the reality is most of the SAG-AFTRA members, they're just working people trying to eke out an existence, right?
Right. So to qualify just for our basic tier of our health plan, you have to earn a revenue in SAG-AFTRA contracts of $26,470 in a year. 87% of our members don't even make that much. So that's in companies that make hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue. So that there's a little bit of a disconnect there. But yeah, no, we're not all from. Every time you see the word Hollywood, that's not who we are. Although we do have some great members who have walked away from very lucrative and expensive contracts. Those folks who do make millions, they're out with us as well. They're not working either. But it's really about, and they will tell you, this is about the journeyman actor. This is the person who gets up at 5 a.m. and shows up at a set and is there all day long in the heat and the cold. So that's really what this contract negotiation is about.
Now, what's the sticking points? I've heard a bunch of stuff, in the media. I've heard a bunch of statements. What do you see as what's the holdup? What's being done here?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the two things that I think are at core that I think people will feel an understanding relationship to is pay and protection. 23% inflation over the last 6 years. And our contracts for 3 years and were fixed before that. So throughout the pandemic, we were set just a little over 2% a year. Obviously, inflation was much more significant to that. So right now we're making less than we would have made in 2020 in terms of real dollars. And so that sort of catch up, we've said, hey, catch us up in year one, and then we can go back to what we hope will be the rate of inflation. It's not tied to anything. And that's, we've come down, the negotiating team's come down from what they asked up front, and the other group hasn't moved at all. So there's just an unwillingness to recognize the plight of every American worker. I think that's across most working unions and most labor organizations today. And the second is protections. We see a growth in artificial intelligence, and that's not just about us. That's about, I think, every working American and every person who lives in this country. Your images, your voice, your photographs of your food, your photographs of your kids and your cats and your dogs are being taken by media corporations and used without your consent or without compensation to make them more money. And so they've actually put into their proposal, as we've talked about, hey, we want some constraints on that. We want some constraints on how you use our image in future technologies. And they've said, okay, we'll give you half a day's pay and we'll own your image and likeness in perpetuity and never pay you again.
Wow.
And not give you your consent for what we use it for. And we've just said, that's a hard no.
Yeah, that is a hard no. I mean, the fact that, they can slap your face on anything is pretty remarkable. Now, you talked about the pay part of this. $26,000 a year. I'm sorry, that's not. I don't see that as a living, considering that when you're pushing for a minimum wage of $15 an hour, which is what, about $31,200 a year. You're well below what any reasonable person would consider even a minimal existence.
Right, which is why I think the huge joke is on some executive that would say we're going to starve you out, because we're all doing other work. We're all doing other jobs. I mean, we have built careers to be able to allow us to tell these stories that are so important to everybody. Look at how we got through the pandemic. If you couldn't go to work or you were stuck at home and couldn't go out, you watch television, or you listen to music, or you watch movies, and that was the work of our members. And we didn't work for those intervening years while those companies made record profits. So we just want, let's be honest, and let's say, hey, let's get us to the point where everybody can afford to have health care, pay their rent, put a roof over their heads, and feed their families.
Let's talk about that for a second, because the streaming services, obviously were huge during the pandemic, and as you pointed out, made a huge amount of money. I've got a friend who keeps telling me, well, they're just being unreasonable with the streaming services because the streaming services are new. And I'm going, I don't think so. I think they're not new, and I think they're wildly profitable. And I don't know that they're accurately telling us how many people are viewing this stuff. So is streaming, is that a huge part of what's going on, especially with the writers? Do you see that in your contract fight too?
It is, because we have allowed it to be treated as new media, going all the way back to Netflix about 10 years ago, and going back to HBO before that. We've made allowances in the past for new media companies to come in and try and change the market and get more work opportunities for our members. What we found now is it's 10 years ago since Netflix won an Emmy for House of Cards, and that's when they kind of exploded. The lack of transparency about how many subscribers they have and what the model is for residuals. And I think that's the toughest thing for people to understand, is that in 1960, we kind of took and changed our pay formula from just being the session fee per day to also include contributions to our health and pension fund, which was created then. And then this concept of residuals, realizing that there would be a chain down the road, whether it was reruns on linear television, or it was usage and views on streaming services, or it was re-release, or how many theaters that it showed in across the country and across the internationally, that we would participate in that revenue stream for as long as that work continued. And that's the second big part of our pay piece. It's a big component of who we are, is that we've agreed to take less over time to get that those residuals. And that's
so you're investing your time and your talent in the hopes that it's going to pay off long term. So that actually saves the studios a boatload of upfront costs, which means a lot more things can be done. It sounds like, again, the working people are doing the sacrificing, making the concessions, and the well-to-do keep walking away with more and more. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Elliot Bales. He's an actor and member of SAG-AFTRA and Actors Equity. You want to check out his website, ElliotBales.com. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Now, I do want to get to this AI thing, because I see this as that first fight, that first little battle of what the war is coming, and that's most of us being replaced at some point by automation or robotics. So however I see your fight right now happening, I think sets the tone for all the rest of us, be it a dumb truck driver like me who's worried about at some point in my lifetime there will be no drivers behind the wheel, to lawyers and doctors and who knows. So what you're doing, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is really the first battle that you don't have a choice but to fight.
It certainly impacts directly right now the technology that's available. If you've got an aging parent like I do, whose Facebook account has been spoofed, and her image and her voice and her pictures have been taken to try and get somebody to give them money, we're already there. We've been there for a while now, and that's just a simple example. But the technology is getting more and more advanced and evolved. And so I see this both. We've said all along, this is not an entertainment dispute. This is a labor dispute.
Right.
This at its core is a fight for every worker. And I believe that it goes all the way to the Congress of the United States, because I think this is a legislation issue. How do we protect the rights of Americans? In 1996, Congress passed HIPAA. And that said, no doctor can give away your medical information without your express consent every time they do it. That's the same place we need to get to in terms of how we control AI, which is here. And then we use it. We're using AI right now to talk and to broadcast and to take pictures and make phone calls. And we appreciate those things that it brings. But how do we protect our privacy? How do we protect ourselves? And how do we protect our jobs going into the future?
That is the question. And AI is going to be a huge part of this future. So, what do you want people to know? I mean, at the end of this, you are right, 100%. This is a labor issue, and I don't think I've ever framed it as an entertainment issue. This is people trading hours of their life for wages that support their family. At the end of the day, I don't care what you do, from being an actor like you to a truck driver, a street sweeper. You deserve to earn a reasonable life-sustaining wage, and we should be fighting for that. But what do you want folks to know? What's the message that if you had the 30-second elevator speech to give to somebody, what is that?
I think that it is that we are a part of the American labor movement and the restoration of the strength of American labor in the United States. Far too long, we've allowed large corporate organizations and their CEOs and institutional investors to control American life, and thereby by controlling the American worker and what they pay and what they don't pay, and by creating political systems that allow them to do that. I think it's time for some of that to be reversed, and to restore that to those powers and those authorities, those protections to every American and the American worker, because that's how the country survives and thrives into the future. And so I think that's the biggest thing for me is we have some beautiful and well-spoken people that get a lot of attention. They're celebrities, and we're using them, and we hope that that's a message that comes through. At the same time, you're going to see a lot of stories, because the same people who control most of the large news media organizations are the very same employers that we are trying to negotiate against. So a lot of the stories will be coming in the next few weeks, and already are now, about some internal struggles and internal strife. We're in the middle of a labor election, which happens in most labor unions at some point. And so we're going to have some of that, but we're like siblings, like all siblings are. We're going to scrap, we're going to fight, we're going to argue, we're going to talk about this piece and that piece. But at the end, it's all about taking down and bringing to the table for a true negotiated deal those yacht riding, Ferrari driving, mansion and dwelling executive.
Yeah, it's all about getting what you earn. You mentioned the studios getting bigger and all this. Is consolidation a huge problem in your industry?
I think we're kind of at the end of that. Part of the big problem they brought to the table, and it's a reasonable one, is they all jumped into streaming without a plan, without a good, thorough business analysis. I'm an entrepreneur. I have to do analysis for my business. I have to know what I can afford and what I can't afford. And they've all jumped in, and they've extended themselves too far. And now the market's flooded. And so that's why you see Bob Iger at Disney saying, "I'm going to sell ABC. I'm going to sell ESPN. I can't. It's away from our core business."
Go ahead.
So I think we may be on the verge of kicking things out and breaking things up, and I think we would love to see that happen.
That'd be a good thing. Lastly, a moment ago you brought up senators, and you brought up some political stuff. Have you gotten much support from the politicos? Joe Biden says he's the most pro-labor president, at least of my lifetime, and I say he is. So anything there? Any help?
I think we're a little early in the process of striking to get to that point yet. But I will say, I think a perfect example is something called the Performing Artists Tax Parity Act, which is a bill that has been in the House since 2014. It has 51 co-sponsors as of today. I'm leading one of the teams with Actors Equity to try and get this passed, and they are bipartisan. There are Republicans and Democrats that are on board saying this is important. We need to take care of these folks who spend 20 to 30% of what they make just getting the next job. And so that's the kind of support we're getting. More people are signing on to that every day, and we hope we'll get that through. And I think that's indicative of the kind of support.
That's the marching order. Elliot, I appreciate you taking some time filling us in. I hope you'll come back and give us some more insight as this hopefully goes on a very short period of time. I fear it's going to be a long one, but I hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
Thanks, Rick, and thanks for taking the time and representing American workers well.
Appreciate it. Thanks so much. Elliot Bales. The website, elliotbales.com. We'll get links out on social media. I can take a look at that. I want to hear your thoughts. I keep saying this is the front lines of the AI war. Do you agree? Right back after this. Stick around.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1970. That was the day that the NFL Players Association went out on strike. The American Football League and the National Football League officially merged that year. Each league had their own Players Association. With the league merger, they joined forces into one union. The players elected John Mackey, a tight end with the Baltimore Colts, their first president. Frustrated by pay and lack of control over their careers, the players voted to strike. The strike lasted for 2 days. The owners threatened to cancel the season. The NFL used its powerful PR machine to vilify the players in the press. They characterized the players as greedy and stoked fan anger over the walkout. The two sides met again at the bargaining table and reached a collective bargaining agreement. The agreement covered 4 years. The players won improvements to their pensions and dental care. They also secured the right to have agent representation for the first time. But many of the disagreements over pay and control remained unsettled. In 1974, the players were back out on the picket line for 5 weeks during the summer. 8 years later, a 57-day strike disrupted the season. 7 weeks of games were canceled. Then again, 5 years later, the union went on strike during the season. This time, some of the players crossed the picket lines, including stars like Joe Montana and Lawrence Taylor. This broke the strike without settling on a contract. Today, the NFL Players Association continues to push for improved player safety and revenue sharing. The impact of concussions on players' long-term health remains an important issue for the union. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
So, I keep talking about this AI thing because it's huge. I mean, this is going to be a big freaking deal. And understand, we're told in the age of technology, we're told in the new era, in the new day, we're in new America now. It's different. Racism's dead. We're not racist anymore, evidently. Evidently, no longer racist. This is what I'm told. We're not racist. And the reality is we can't deny that racism is real. That people have their biases, and look, I'm not calling everyone a racist. I think we got to stop doing a bunch of that. But there is racism out there. There is, homophobia and misogynist, all that stuff. It's out there. There was an interesting story that I came across that the Boston Globe put out. A student from MIT, her name's Rona Wang. She's a computer science major, decided that she was going to, check AI. What she did is she put, this is amazing. She used the new AI language and image tools that are out there, and she created a LinkedIn profile with herself, an AI portrait, and all this stuff. She put all this information in there. Picture of herself in a red MIT sweatshirt. She's smiling. And then she sent the image to something called Playground AI, and then asked it to turn that image into a professional LinkedIn profile photo. So she's like, here's all my information. Here's my qualifications. Here's my education. Here's all my stuff. Creating this LinkedIn page. Take my image and make it professional, whatever that means. So they took the picture of her. She's an Asian woman. Skin, little, I'm not sure what the right, a little yellower, I guess. And what the AI generator spit back at her is unrecognizable. It's a completely different person. It's the same photo, same hair, almost. But instead of having dark eyes, she's got blue eyes. Instead of having, an Asian complexion, I'll go with that, she's very white. So they even lightened her. You know, it was. I'm looking at this going, I thought AI was supposed to be non-biased. I thought this was supposed to help us get better. And what it shows is that, it shows that we are racist, because the reality is it only takes from what we put on the internet. So it's taking all of this information and all of this stuff, and it is creating its own alternative universe. That interestingly enough, turned this Asian woman into a blue-eyed white woman. It's amazing how that happens. Quite remarkable, to be honest. Quite remarkable. Let's quick go to the phones before break. We got Tom from Wisconsin on line one. Tom, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. What's on your mind?
I would like to know why these people are selling title insurance and LifeLock, and the conservatives are hawking it all the time, but they're not doing anything about it.
Well, because there's money to be made. That would be my quick answer.
They should be doing something about, making the banks responsible.
That's if you actually believed in having some regulatory oversight, and you actually believed that there should be a cop on the beat. In their world, it's, hey, there's a sucker around every corner, and if I can put money in my pocket by taking it from somebody else, that's how it appears to me. I wish a conservative would tell me otherwise, but that's how it appears to me.
It sounds like fire insurance from the mafia days.
Yeah, there is that.
Your parents, your place won't burn down.
Yeah, it's a mighty nice house you got there. It'd be a shame if something happened to it.
Yep. You have a good night.
Thanks,
Bye.
Tom. Appreciate it. No, it's a good question. And again, it's one of those things where Florida right now is going through trouble, because you've got all of these homeowner insurance companies who are bailing because they're looking at the risks that are coming and going, this is an economic nightmare for us. This is where the actual moneyed interests are going, no, we should go. Even though the homeowners insurance in Florida, from what I'm told, has quadrupled during DeSantis's time. And you go, well, it's not DeSantis' fault. Yeah, it is, because they're doing nothing. In fact, not only are they doing nothing, they're advocating for making things even worse. So am I surprised that you would have right-wing bloviators saying, "Oh, get LifeLock, or get this, my favorite one, food insurance. That's my favorite. If there's ever a disaster, you're going to have food from the food insurance people." And you go, but if there's ever this disaster, there's no food being produced. How's food insurance going to get to you when there's no food being produced? And when they're not around, and there's no government left to enforce your crummy, poorly written, small worded contract. Yeah, but hey, there's a sucker born every minute. And they're out there, and they're listening to, you name the right-wing nut job, who's saying, everything's fine. Phoenix, 32 days over 100. People are getting burnt when they just kneel on and they fall on the ground. The water temperature in Florida over 100 degrees. If you don't look at that and go, something's wrong. Maybe we should, change some policies. Maybe think about helping someone change some things so that maybe it doesn't get to 102, 103. No, disaster capitalism works, my friends, because it feeds their pockets now. And then down the road, what they know government's going to bail them out. They know it, because we always do, don't we? Because you always get, liberals like me going, all those poor people. Those poor people who lived on the water, who have been, rebuilt their house 6 times. The insurance company, those evil insurance companies, they won't cover them. Amazing stuff. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around.
We would not be seeing these unprecedented extreme weather events in the absence of human-caused warming from the burning of fossil fuels and carbon pollution.
Extreme heat waves in U.S. and Europe virtually impossible without human-caused climate change, study finds. Extreme heat plus pollution doubles the risk of fatal heart attacks. Plus,
how big of a deal do you think this announcement is? a big deal.
Major U.S. automakers unite to build national EV charging network.
All of those big deals and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I was just on an oil rig in Texas. It's the most patriotic thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, sure. Destroy the United States. God bless America. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I don't know how many hot tubs there are for residents of Florida, but it sounds like they don't need to buy one now.
No, they certainly do not, but they might want a hot tub time machine. Waters off Florida topped 100 degrees for 2 straight days, and if verified, that could be a new all-time high world record. Much of the northern hemisphere remains in the grip of weeks-long heat waves with stunning but predictable impacts around the Mediterranean with temperatures around 120 degrees. Fast-spreading heat and wind-driven wildfires have forced new evacuations and tragically killed dozens in Algeria as they were trying to escape the flames. In Catania, Sicily, officials say the prolonged extreme heat has melted underground cables, knocking out power and water to hundreds of thousands.
I guess you didn't think of that when you've been calling for them to bury the power lines out here in the U.S., did you?
Good point. Cereal crop production in southern Europe is also predicted to fall by as much as 60% over last year's yields due to the heat. Phoenix's record streak of consecutive days over 110 degrees still ain't over as we go to air, with the city on track to become the first major U.S. city to see an average monthly temperature higher than 100 degrees. City buses are being used as mobile cooling centers. Hospitals are filling body bags with ice to treat heat victims. As the heat drags on, municipalities across the country are racing to install long-term adaptation measures like cool roofs, reflective pavement, and planting street trees. Sadly, Arizona's record streak of extreme heat and drought is testing the ability of the state's saguaro cactus to survive, both in the wild and in urban areas. The iconic symbol of the American West is adapted to heat, but critical summer monsoon rains have failed to arrive this year. Conservationists report the long-lived cacti are losing branches and collapsing.
Not good.
Several new studies this week focus on health threats from the heat. An analysis found that the combination of extreme heat and air pollution may double the risk of fatal heart attacks. 2 new studies find warmer overall temperatures are expanding the range of disease-carrying mosquitoes and ticks, which are spreading farther north. A new report by World Weather Attribution scientists finds that the record-shattering heat waves this summer in southern Europe, North America, and China would have been, quote, virtually impossible without climate change. The scientists warn that unless the world rapidly stops burning fossil fuels that cause man-made climate change, these extreme heat events will become much more frequent, occurring every 2 to 5 years.
I think that's going to be more frequent than that.
But climate scientists have repeatedly urged speeding up the transition away from fossil fuels to prevent warming and its impacts from getting even worse. Here's Dr. Leah Stokes on CBS News.
This isn't like a permanent situation. If we stopped burning fossil fuels, the temperature would start to stabilize. But unfortunately, until we do that, there's a lot of warming in the system and it's going to keep getting worse. I'm not interested in talking about how it's impossible or how it's not real. It's real, it's happening now, and we know what to do to stop it.
I'm interested in talking about how impossible it is.
But there is some good news. Toyota has announced a new electric vehicle battery chemistry that it says cuts costs in half and can go more than 700 miles on a single charge.
Really?
The European Union passed a law to blanket its highways with fast EV chargers by the end of 2025.
Cool.
And in the U.S., 7 major automakers, including BMW, GM, and Honda, have joined forces to build 30,000 chargers in an expansive EV fast charging network across the U.S. and Canada that will integrate restaurants and retail stores.
Impossible. We'll never do it. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. It wouldn't be patriotic Don't forget, you can download our reports anytime via Pandora, TuneIn, Apple, Google, or Amazon Podcasts. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on Facebook, Mastodon, and the website formerly known as Twitter at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So President Biden tweeted out, I think it was yesterday, we're asking the Department of Labor to issue a heat hazard alert that reaffirms workers have heat-related protections under federal law. We should be protecting workers from hazardous conditions, and I will call out states that refuse to protect those who work in this awful heat. That would be you, Texas. Everyone's still looking at you because your Death Star bill, which is incredible to me that you would even do that. But good on the president for doing this. I mean, you know, for me, as a union guy, this is one of those things that the union should be out there fighting for. And we see this in the UPS contract that finally those UPS drivers are going to get air conditioning in their package cars. But in these states that are vehemently anti-union, the federal government has got to step in. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on worker protections in my state of Pennsylvania and how well I think the UPS contract went, at least for the package car drivers, to get some air conditioning. I've asked Pennsylvania State Representative Nick Piscatano to come talk with us. He's the legislative representative for the 38th legislative district out there in Allegheny County. Nick, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, Rick, how's it going?
All good so far. I got to tell you, I'm looking at this tweet by the president going, it's great that the president's out there saying this. It's great that they're pushing the Department of Labor to actually do something. But should we have to have this? Shouldn't this be just being decent employers? Or I'm struggling where we are as a country.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think you're seeing in a lot of different industries right now, just the fact that employers don't want to be decent employers. No one's asking to make $1 million a year. Not every worker has to make that kind of wage. We're just asking for dignity at work and safe workplaces and a fair wage that they can put food on the table for their family. And you're seeing people who, at the top of these large organizations, just denying the humanity of some workers and refusing to give them water breaks during extreme heat, where there, in some of the southern states, you're talking about heat indexes in the 115s or more, and the human body just isn't built for something like that. Yeah. And so to refuse to make reasonable accommodations at work during those kind of circumstances is just unbelievable.
Should be criminal, in my view. We should be locking these folks up. And I've said this for years. I mean, now the good thing is I've always had a union job, and I remember on the heavy heat days we used to go in and we would get extra break time, we'd get extra water breaks, and the union demanded it. The sad reality is most workers in this country don't have that kind of ability to demand their safety, and sadly are put into positions that they can't defend themselves. And this is where, again, government has to step in. But I don't think it's ever enough.
Yeah, I mean, when we talk about the UPS, the Teamsters working at UPS and the delivery cars especially, people don't believe me when I tell them that those big brown vans that come down your street every day don't have air conditioning. So it's 2023, and people don't believe me that doesn't exist. And that is one of the key things that the Teamsters were fighting for in this contract, was just the dignity of being able to not be overheated for 8 to 10 hours a day as you're carrying heavy packages up and down stairs and getting in a car and driving to the next house and doing it all over again. And it was something like that, so common sense and basic and commonplace now, that they had to fight tooth and nail to get added to the contract. And so it's small little things like that where you're seeing these strikes across the country. And it's because of those small little indignities that keep piling up that the people at the top of these giant corporations refuse to give an inch to any of the workers, even when it's a commonplace thing.
No, and then look, in a lot of places, the organizing that I've talked to people who are fighting for a union, it's not about wages most of the time. It's about dignity. It's not about the wages they earn. It's about their benefits and the conditions under which they exist. And that to me is well, a sad testament of where we are, but not surprising given the fact that in the private sector, unionized labor is only about 6.7%, and overall we're just over 10%. There has to be a resurgence, and that comes back to, I think, folks like you passing laws and getting things done to make it a little bit easier and make it to where there isn't as much harassment and intimidation that we see happening. And I know you guys are working on it. So can you give me an update on where we are? I know you're pushing an amendment to protect labor rights. Where are we in Pennsylvania?
Yeah, so last time I was here a couple months ago, we talked a lot about our constitutional amendment in Pennsylvania here that would basically enshrine the right to organize in the Pennsylvania Constitution. It's a federal right now, but we want to strengthen those protections in the state constitution. I'm happy to report that it was passed out of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives a couple months ago now. We got one Republican, all Democrats voted for it. It still has to go to the state Senate, which is controlled by Republicans, so we're not sure what to expect over there. But if nothing else, we stood up and we said that we believe in these fundamental American rights, that you have the right to organize, collectively bargain for safe workplaces, fair wages at your place of employment. And I think that sent a great message.
Yeah. Well, it's a which side are you on moment. I mean, this is when you take these votes, you're picking sides. Are you going to be on the right side of history, or are you going to be on the side of taking rights away and dignity away? I mean, to me, the ability to have some say in the workplaces should be a basic human dignity.
Yeah, and I mean, we talked. So we here in Pittsburgh, we had some rallies with UPS about 2 weeks ago. We had a rally with SAG-AFTRA today. And that's really what we talked about was, you're not just fighting for a wage, a salary, anything common like that. It's about fair treatment at work. And, for the UPS drivers, I wrote opinion piece that explained how, the Teamsters are fighting for their members who are UPS drivers. But this contract that they fought for and succeeded on will change the industry for union and non-union shops. So it lifts all workers all at the same time. Even the non-unionized workers who aren't Teamsters are going to benefit from this, because the companies that compete with UPS will lose all their workers to UPS if they don't also raise their standards, right? And so the bargaining and the negotiating that the Teamsters went through to lift their members at UPS is also going to benefit the entire industry. When we're talking about Amazon deliveries and FedEx and all those other delivery companies in that spaces are going to have to raise their wages and benefits to match or be competitive with UPS now, or they're going to lose all their employees. And so you can see the power of the union, even in a small single shop like UPS, how it reverberates across the industry. And we talked about that today with SAG-AFTRA too. They're fighting for not just their wages over the next couple years of this contract, but how residuals are calculated for the next generation. How the use of AI to artificially take likenesses of people who were previously in shows or movies and recreate them, how people are fairly compensated for that. And so there are big issues at stake here. And that's why you're seeing this wave of strikes and these big issues come to the forefront this summer.
Yeah, no, and it's great to see. But the sad reality is, and this is where, I've had a conversation with friends over the Starbucks organizing. It's great to see the organizing. It's great to see the passion. It's great to see all the excitement. It's great to see all the activity. But our laws are so badly broken that I fear they never get a contract, and that what ends up coming out of the other side of this is, we spent a lot of time doing this, but didn't get anywhere for it. And this is where I come back to you as a legislator, and I come back to, policymakers going, we've got to make it easier for people who want to join and form unions to be able to do that, because that is the intent, the original intent of the NLRA, to encourage people to join and form unions so that we don't have to pass laws over something simple as getting a water break on a really hot day. That you do that in the workplace, you take care of it among yourself. That seems logical to me.
Yeah, and we have a lot of conversations about the vote the organizing vote to determine whether or not you want to affiliate with the union is like the big milestone that a lot of people talk about. And it's certainly important, don't get me wrong. But we've now seen recently that between a successful vote and a first contract is the hardest part of a union organizing drive. It's at that point where the company, if they choose to fight the drive, have the most options on the table. That's the part of the drive where federal and state laws have been weakened the most. And, that we have some folks that, voted to join a union years ago and can never get to that first contract because of all the different legal hurdles that the ownership throws up in place. And, it's kind of a gray area between what the states can do and what the federal government has to do. And a lot of that stuff has been chipped away at the federal level for many decades. But you're right. That is the area that we really need to focus on and make sure we can improve so that workers have that ability, not only to say, we want to form or join a union, but also we can get to that first contract where it becomes a reality. That's what our bill enshrining those kinds of rights in the Pennsylvania Constitution is also trying to strengthen those provisions.
No, I mean, and I can tell you firsthand, when I was doing organizer, I had an employer tell me there will never be a contract here. I'll shut the doors and there's nothing you can do about it. And when you have that kind of anti-union sentiment, there's a problem here.
Yeah, I mean, I would shout out my friends and colleagues that are currently on strike with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette here, one of the oldest newspapers in the country, older than the United States Constitution, in fact. They had a contract, then the ownership of that paper did some unfair labor practices, then they were locked out. They've been on strike for a long time, and we're talking about News Guild writers, we're talking about Teamsters who drive the